Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of That Real Estate Tech Guy. I'm your host, Jordan Samuel Fleming, host of the podcast and chairman and co-founder of Smartphone. Just finished recording a phenomenal episode with my buddy Nick Lamagna. You probably know Nick from his podcast, the A Game podcast. It's a great, but if you haven't listened to it, I mean, don't stop listening to this one, but go afterwards. The links are in the show description. It's a really great podcast because it's of course there's a lot of real estate focus on it, but it also just brings in a lot of really cool people from a lot of different disciplines. I just it's basically just high performers speaking, and talking to Nick. And Nick's such a great guy to speak to that a lot of high performers want to speak to him. This is really fun because Nick's got a really eclectic background, and that gives him an insight. I think it gives him an amazing insight. He's a very cool guy. I've really enjoyed getting to know Nick over particularly the last sort of this year as we connected personally. But there's a couple things I loved about what Nick's talked about. First of all, Nick's focus on what makes a great performer and why, those principles are in Nick's mind, and I agree with them. They're sort of universal, but not enough people apply them, right? And so, diving into how those principles really can help you and will help you build your business profitably and properly. But also, I loved, him sort of breaking down how he made the leap very early into remote investing and how he sort of found his way and kind of just whittled down in each market what the kind of buy box should be. And I think it's different than how I've heard people describe it before. And it's very Nick, and I think it's really it's really cool. It shows a very different approach to it, in my opinion, but clearly a very successful one. And I think successful mainly because Nick's got such a great eclectic background and skill set. I think Nick could do anything. So super fun episode. I also just have a blast talking to Nick. He's such a nice guy. Do check out his podcast or go to nicknicknick.com, and you've got the podcast and all of his socials and resources and everything he's got there. And enjoy this episode. Enjoy me and Nick chatting Chicago, music, real estate, high performers, and a little bit of MMA as well. And I'm here live with my good friend, Nick Lamagna. Nick, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you just take a few minutes to introduce yourself and a bit about your background?
What's up, man? I'm happy to be here. Excited to connect with you as always, man. We always have good conversations. I appreciate you having me on. I am a guy who I tell everybody he's not great at anything. I'm just good at a whole lot of stuff. I try a whole lot of stuff. So I have a lot of experience on things done right and wrong. And I guess a quick overview is I never thought, similar to you, musical background, never thought I was going to be a business guy. I thought I was going to be a punk rock guitar player or a boxer or some sort of artist. And then eventually I decided I wanted to do law enforcement after 9/11, so I thought I was going to be FBI, CIA, DEA, and all those fun things. And I started doing construction to kill time before I went into an academy. And had a faulty machinery one day at work, came down, crushed my hand, and then none of these law enforcement places would take me anymore because of the hand injury. I was liability, and so I was kind of left with a whole bunch of student loan debt and didn't really know what to do and where to go. And I stumbled upon the book Rich Dad Poor Dad when my mom forced me to read it, and from there, I went on and started realizing, okay, man, millionaires are made through real estate. You don't need any money or credit to start. I don't have either one of those things. So let me start going down there. And met Robert Allen, started getting educated, signed up for a seminar, borrowed money to go pay for their training, and started just taking action, doing some deals. And I was in New York trying to do deals, making it work like within the 5 boroughs of Long Island with no money, no credit, no experience. And it got really hard and really competitive at a really weird time in the market. And I was forced to start to look in other markets that were a little bit more affordable and a little bit less competitive. And I was pretty pissed off about it at first. And it turned into one of the best things that ever happened to me because it forced me to do remote investing way before remote investing was like a cool thing to do. And then you realize you have the entire country as your marketplace. And really, there's always going to be a place to get deals. And so I started doing the remote investing thing. And while I was doing real estate, I got heavy into jiu-jitsu and boxing and MMA and, just kind of use real estate as a vehicle to be able to train every day and hang out with my dog and do some things that I love. And eventually started the podcast and wound up doing all sorts of different real estate stuff from single family to multifamily, tax sales, wholesaling small deals, wholesaling commercial deals, and then getting into inbound marketing and handling it more like a business than a hobby, and found things like smartphone and found all kinds of stuff like that, and realized some of the big players. So I started getting into masterminds with some of the people that we're in right now, and really see how some of the big boys and girls do it. And every day I just feel honored that my phone still gets texts from people like you. And I'm like, man, why are these people calling me? I don't deserve these sets of phone calls. But it's been an amazing road that I have a lot of really cool relationship capital along the way, from just, hanging out and surrounding myself with like-minded people that have spilled over into my personal and my professional life. And we're here today just freezing in snowy Chicago and having a good conversation with my buddy Jordan.
Are you in Chicago?
Yeah, I'm in Chicago right now.
Oh yeah, okay, all right. Well, I'm freezing in Poland right now, so and it is it's not brutally cold. Like, as a Canadian who's been to the Arctic, I've been in colder by quite a lot. Um, but it's one of those wet colds right now that just with the wind that just goes in Chicago. That's like that's the Chicago cold, right? It's just wet and windy.
Well, I lived in the west side of New York, right by the Hudson. Dude, when that wind would kick in off of, oh my God, dude, yeah, I would go jogging, walk around. Oh, that was terrible. That was too. Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about you because my buddy sent me where somebody made a post about the president of Poland, and they showed him training and like what he does to stay in shape, and he was like training with all these MMA guys, and he was hitting pads and sparring, and he was a beast, dude. He was like total killer, like definitely trained, good tech. Like you wouldn't have known that that was like a politician. You would have been like, that's like a really good fighter. It was pretty cool to see like a politician like in shape, kind of getting at and throwing down and stuff. It was cool.
Well, he used to be a bit of a thug as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, so I mean, we're not gonna get too deep into that because you're in Chicago, and by the way, Poland, the second largest Polish population, I believe, is in Chicago. I actually fly through Chicago a lot. Because there's a direct Warsaw, Chicago route where, depending if I'm going to Utah or somewhere like that, it's often easier for me to go to Chicago than anywhere else. But yeah, he used to be a bit of a thug, if I'm honest. He used to be a bit of a gangster, kind of. And so it's not surprising to me that he can kick the shit out of someone. That's the truth. And it's so funny, you and I I've known about you for years. And I think we chatted a couple times in Podio. I think we talked about that
Yeah.
before, but it's only recently where we finally actually connected properly. Which has been really one of the fun things about this, about this smaller community, that we're in, is that, you start to know the names, you start to know the people, and then you start to build the relationships properly. And I think we're just all so lucky that for the most part, most people are pretty decent as well.
Yeah, yeah, overall, like it's a pretty cool community. I feel like fighters and business guys and girls that have been around a long enough time, it's not that often that somebody's like a real asshole, because I feel like you have to have humility because you get humbled a lot in business, you get humbled a lot in jiu-jitsu, like a level out in boxing. Like you always know every day that you could be the hammer or the nail. And I feel like if you have too big an ego, you're not going to make it that far. You're not going to find that level of success. Or if you're not doing it the right way, like if you're taking shortcuts, if you're not being true to like who you are and doing good business, you're not gonna, it's word's gonna spread fast. Because it's funny, you said it like, oh, a little small community. It feels huge. Like you feel like everybody does what you do, and then you realize that like fighters and real estate investors, like you think just because all the people that do that, it's such an actual small demographic of people. But you
It
assume
feels
everyone.
large. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny you say fighters. I don't know if you see my knuckles. I'm working in a new pair of gloves right now, of boxing gloves, and I didn't have tape with me, and I was on the heavy bag the other day and just destroyed my knuckles. And
Yeah.
that's always, once until you break them in, it is a painful experience.
Yeah.
um Let me ask you, something you brought up there around, suddenly getting into remote, trying to having it pushed into more remote investing earlier. um one of the things I find really interesting about remote is the big markets that everybody, the big sexy markets where you've got big prices and possibly big wins. also fluctuate hard and tend to get really badly hit if something like 2008 happens or whatever. You suddenly see that go nuts. And I remember speaking to my buddy Larry Goins, who's a real estate investor out of North Carolina, and I remember him saying to me, I love small town America to invest because a $58,000 house is going to be a $58,000 house is going to be it's not going to, I'm not going to have the big wins, but I can just keep building and building a kind of consistency. And is that kind of, is that what you found when you started to go remote? You were able to target different, or did it force you to target differently? I don't know.
It's a little bit of a mixed bag of nuts. And it's funny because there's really no wrong answer. Like you talk to all these guys, like you see it in these masterminds. One guy's like, I go to these middle, small American markets where I can get some great cash from that. That's how I build my whole business. And then the guy in the next room's like, I don't do anything in those markets. You don't get any appreciation. You can't make any money like that. But I feel like it's all whatever you focus on. But like they play the different strengths. And I made the mistake first because, I started out no money, no credit. And so you just think that it's safer doing cheaper deals because that's what you can afford. And I just felt like, who's going to lend me like $500,000, but maybe somebody will lend me $50,000. And if I make a $50,000 mistake on a property, it's not like I can pay that back. You know what I mean? So you start to be like, all right. So, but then you realize like you get what you pay for. And so you start doing these deals. And so my initial thought pattern was, I'm going to go get these really cheap properties and I'm going to cash flow them for what rents say on paper could be this extraordinary return that I'm going to pay this really low amount of money for, and I'm going to kill it and I'm going to buy a bunch of those. And then you start to realize, well, there's a reason you can buy these properties for $5,000. And even though like you might get good cash flow, they're not actually performing assets because the reason they're so cheap is because you're going to renovate it. Somebody's going to break in. They're going to steal everything. You're going to have to renovate it again. You're going to get somebody in. They're not going to pay. And like after a while, you're like, now I know why.
Problem after problem after problem. You're buying problems more than anything.
Yeah, so I feel like there's a happy medium between some of these middle America that like yeah, like that if for cash flow, way better for just you don't have to worry about the peaks and valleys. Like the Indianas, the Kansas Cities, like those have always just been really good markets that you're not seeing take like a 20% swing overnight or anything like that. So I like that because rents have gone up. So if I'm gonna buy and hold, I really do like those types of markets. But flipping is a little bit different in the sense that if I'm going to flip it, I don't really need it to be a more at lower middle America price point because generally I'm in and out in 6 months, and if I'm doing it the right way, I'm not going to be affected by a change in a market that drastically because what I like to usually do is look at days on market and data last sale, and if you're looking at something, you're comping it out and saying, look, even if it's I am big on middle income though. So if you want to look at the median income of that area, as long as it's an average affordable income for that area, that's where I like to stay because, affordable for Indiana is different than affordable in some of these places in Florida, New York, New Jersey. But that's a normal price point that tends to be a safer place to go. And so I like to stick within those FHA price points. And as long as when I'm looking at it, I say, you know what? Days on market are 30 to 45 days. And there was a comp that was in the last 30 to 45 days in a worst case scenario within 6 months, if that market starts to move, I might have to have a little bit of a longer hold time and I might have to drop the price a little. But it should never be like I was going to make 50 and I lost 50. You know what I mean? It's just, okay, well, I made a little bit less money, but now I see that this market's on the decline a little bit. So let me pull back and I won't buy anymore. I'll go find another market. So generally, if I stick to those parameters on the flipping side, you can really make it work anywhere and not really take too much of a hit by the market moving. But for cash flow, yeah, like I really like those little bit kind of flyover states, a little bit more affordable markets.
Well, and I think it's a really good point you make as well that you can make almost anything work if like, because I think there's sometimes that people and the social media has not helped us in this. This like social media doesn't help us in a lot of things, but the kind of expert secret and blah 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 that we always kind of see on social media. The truth is the fundamentals, and I think what you just said, like if I identify exactly what makes sense to me and I stick within the parameters that I know I can play in, I may not win enormously. Like I may not make have a one of these one in a thousand moment wins, but I'm also not gonna really lose anything. I'm gonna be strong, and I take a slightly less than I was going to because things happened, or maybe it takes slightly longer. I've got a bit more holding costs, whatever. But sticking within a parameter that where the deals are going to work is something that I think is such common sense, but I don't think a lot of people do it like that. I think a lot of people, they chase the shiny instead of chasing the sensible.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 1,000%. I think another thing that has worked out really well for me over the years was not investing in a major city, but investing around a major city. So you go and you find like, I don't like if I say Dallas, it's like, well, I'm not in Dallas. I'm within, I think Jason Hartman, he coined the term geo-arbitrage, which it was like basically a name for what I always tell people is you have markets like Pennsylvania, Connecticut, parts of New Jersey, where there's people that live in New York City, people that live in San Francisco, and they're going, wait, I'm paying like $700,000 for this like studio apartment. I can move an hour and a half away from here, and I can have a white picket fence and a backyard and a pool and a dog and the whole thing. But they still have to be close enough that they can commute back and forth to work. And those markets tend to be a little bit less competitive. You get more bang for your buck, and over time, they tend to appreciate and become higher end markets. So those are the ones that I feel like, as people, especially today, you see it paid off better than ever because people get priced out of these huge markets, and then like the suburbs become like the new hot place to live, especially like if you had some stuff on the outskirts during the pandemic.
If you started like that, yeah, you're great. It's so funny that commute lifestyle that we're in. To your point, where depending on what the epicenter is, if it's in New York or something like that, the chances of a longer willingness to commute to get is there. I had a buddy that, I mean, this is Europe, so it doesn't isn't as relevant, but I had a buddy genuinely who worked in London, center of London, like a 15-minute walk from King's Cross rail station, which is the main one rail station in London if you've never been. And he was paying he was paying a fortune for a house in London, and then the school fees and the blah blah blah. And so he's working, he and his wife were working like nuts and had nothing to show for it, really. He decided they moved to York, and he commuted from York because he worked it out, and he was already commuting an hour and a half a day across London because London's such a shit show to do.
Yeah.
So to add an extra half an hour commute, who gives a shit? And he just got a first class train ticket every day. His overall commute was only an hour longer for both ways, and half an hour each way. And instead, he was in York where he could have a mansion. And he had, instead of a crappy little apartment, he had a mansion. And I think there's a lot of truth in that kind of surrounding area where people are tired, and if you can get in early enough, those surrounding areas become gold, absolute golden markets.
Yeah, man, I 1,000% agree. And there's something to be said for that too. I think some people, and I admit maybe it might wear off at some point, but I think some people still have that PTSD of, at some point there could be another pandemic. And if I get locked down, I now want to have like a big house that I can have a home office and some privacy and a gym versus like, you're in an apartment building in the city. It's a freaking nightmare. You know what I mean? So it's like, God forbid, like at least I have this to be like my sanctuary if that ever happens again. Like that, you never know, dude. You know what I mean? Like people prepare for that stuff.
Absolutely, and I think there's a really fascinating kind of when I look at some of the biggest investors that we have in our platform and where they are, it is not necessarily where you think they would be. It's not necessarily the biggest markets. They just happen to really capture their markets and really develop a solid structure that has them doing hundreds of deals a year.
Dude,
And
Eric Brewer.
yeah,
What is he? He's in like some weird, like nowhere, Pennsylvania doing 500 deals a year.
yeah, Eric and his team, Benmont. Benmont was just on the other day. Actually, I was talking to Benmont. I'm seeing Benmont in February. I'm going to be seeing him in person. But yeah, Eric, great example, Pennsylvania, where you would never think these guys are going to do 500 plus deals a year,
Yeah.
and they're crushing it. and they're absolutely crushing it. But I think that goes to show, to your point, I think it goes to show that, you know, to me, it goes to show that getting those fundamental bits right is what's critical. Now, let me ask you, when you said, you sort of said, I look for, is it fitting within my kind of box of where I want to go? How did you develop, like, what was the process that you kind of went through to find what fits you the best?
So it's interesting because my personality has changed a lot since I first started. I came in kind of, artistic guy. So with an artistic, you kind of wing things like parallels in life, like learning how to play guitar. I could not read a sheet of music, but like if I heard a song, I would just figure out how to play it. And I feel like I handled business the same way before I understood systems and processes. I was just like, you know what? I need a deal. I just want to be open to a deal. And so up until very recently, when I started figuring out like, marketing, you can't just market for the whole country because that doesn't like you've got to have some deep pockets if you want to do marketing for all 50 states. So I've had to kind of pick something, but my model was kind of like, hey, I'm almost like going to throw a dart for 5 or 10 places that I think could be good places to invest that have affordable price points that I know other guys that are doing deals there. And I literally just started calling as many realtors as I could and putting out hundreds of offers. And then I refer to them as fishing lines. I was like, you know what? I don't really know what I want. I need deals. So I got to put out offers because that's really the only magic I know. And so I just put out tons and tons of offers. And then you started catching fish. You started getting some offers accepted. And by default, I would get some like Michigan and then some in Nevada and then some in Georgia. And then when you go into due diligence, you start to realize like, well, there's not really any comps here. And then you get feedback. You go, you know what? Like, I can't really do this one because the days on market's too high, or I can't really do this one because I'm looking to fix it up and there's nothing fixed up in the area, or like this one has too many vacancies. And it was more of like throwing out a really wide net, making contacts and dealing with 80, 85, 90% of the people that would never even call me back. Or if I did like get one connection, the second I didn't buy it over asking price, they never call me back again. But eventually you got a few people that were like willing to put the time in, and you just had dialogue with them of like, keep sending me stuff because we're getting closer every time. And then eventually they send you some stuff and you go, yeah, like this is the kind of stuff I'm looking for. It looks like this now. You send me comps that it's going to look like this later. That one sold a couple of blocks away a few weeks ago. Like, this is exactly what we need. Let's make an offer on this one and now send me more. And you slowly train them to be able to send you better leads. And I just would stick to that box of like, hey, let's find out what the median price point is for this area. Look for things that when they're fixed up to this standard, they're selling in under 30 to 45 days in the last 30 to 45 days. And then let's just lock it up under contract. And under contract, then we can start to build a team. So I was always very good at really just working with people to allow them to give me the data to make enough offers and keep them fired up enough to stay patient until we got one accepted. And then once I got a deal under contract, I would basically just drop everything and I would pick up the phone and I would get a team together within like 24 to 48 hours. And I would just have contractors going through there and inspectors going through there and property managers and realtors. And I would just basically like hyper focus on that deal. And then eventually, 5 of those would fall out of contract because then you start to learn, well, in this market, this is, you got to worry about radon, you got to worry about foundation, you got to worry about this, you got to worry about insurance is through the roof, taxes are too high. But eventually you get one, and then that one works out. And like once you close that one, everybody goes, dude, that was awesome. Let's do another one. It's like, cool. Well, now you know exactly what I'm looking for. Let's find 2 more of those. And like over the years, I would get 2 or 3 markets and I'd find 3 to 5 people in each of those 2 or 3 markets that were willing to actually put the time in to find me those deals and just do one. And then it repeated the process. And then, eventually you move out to that market, but they know somebody in another one and you get, so it really was more of just throwing darts and having patience and persistence and then learning process along the way of like what to look for and what not to, basically what to tell them not to bring you.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt this amazing conversation, but I wanted to make sure you knew that Smartphone, the only phone system built for real estate investors, connects to the best-in-class real estate investing CRMs. And because, as it's my show and I am co-founder and chairman of Smartphone, I got some great deals for you. Click the link, take advantage of 5,000 minutes free calling with Smartphone, the only phone system built for real estate investors. Click and call. Close more leads. Back to the show. Well, and I think the learning process there is the key bit. Like, the takeaway that for me is that what you're really doing is whittling down. You're whittling down and uh shaping what ultimately is what you want. You don't necessarily know it to begin with. You're finding it, like a sculptor may find the sculpture inside a big bit of granite or whatever. But that's a you know but the key is being able to then to learn from that, and when you find that fit, to be able to go, okay, now we can run this play for a bit.
Yeah.
And and that's a really fascinating, like, I don't think I've ever heard anybody articulate their method in quite that way. Most people, I think, take the opposite, maybe kind of coming from the other way. You whittle down, whereas I think a lot of people micro up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting. I wonder if that has to do with to your point, whether that has to do with your creative background, with your eclectic. I would say you've got a very eclectic background as well. You're not someone who has, taken a linear path
Yeah.
to where you are. You've pinged around and done some things, which probably gives you even more either confidence or instinct for being able to go, this is the right feel. Let's go down this route a little further. I think that's
Yeah, I think it gives you a little bit of both. It's almost like you get confidence after doing it for a little while that you know that you can get a deal. It's just a matter of having enough, like, the people that you're training need to see that you're confident that you know it will work, and they just have to trust you, because it is a little bit at first of like, look, I've done this in all these other places. They go, yeah, but you haven't done it here. Like for years, it's always like, well, I know you did it there, but you don't know how this plays. Well, like, it's always the same conversation, but I'm always like, it's all the same stuff. But it's interesting because I do hear the other side of that, where guys are like, you need to pick one shot. Like if you're doing sub two, you're only doing sub two. If you're doing multifamily, you're only doing multifamily. You're only doing it in this place. But if that would have been my approach, I don't think I would have had success. And so, like, part of it is like, yeah, I'm confident because I've done all these different things. But then I get in rooms with guys that are like masters of what they do. And it's like, I feel like a white belt next to Pace talking about sub two. I feel like an idiot listening to Jason Hartman talk about the economy. So, like, when you stack up against these other guys that I refer to as black belts, and I realize that, like, it gives you that inferiority complex as well. But I've just kind of accepted, like, almost like jujitsu. When I walk into any room, I'm not going to be the killer in the room, and I'm also not going to be the best, the worst or the best guy. I'm happy being right in the middle and just being happy to be there. And that's become more of my approach, because you can get overwhelmed or intimidated very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly in this game where we, where people some people get elevated. Now, that not saying they don't deserve to be elevated either. Like, I know anybody who works as hard as Pace. Like, I don't know if that guy's ever spent a night in his own house, at this point, like, and all these guys are very smart, very switched on, and they work super hard, and there's a reason that they're well known. It's not an accidental bit of social media for most of them. Some are accidental, but certainly not Pace, and not a number of the guys we know mutually. But you don't have to. I think and you've probably had that experience, when you actually end up sitting down and having a chat with these guys over beer or whatever, you realize that the distance between you and them is not that far at all. Because, in my view, and that's not arrogance. That's just like, most people are just really, uh, I think most people who are successful and which I think goes to your A game podcast, actually, there are habits, there are habits, and there are personality traits, and there are mindsets where, regardless of kind of where you are or what you're focused on, chances are you're going to succeed a little. Like, you have been successful in a number of different fields. I have been successful in a number of different fields. And I think most people who are successful, you could drop them in almost any field and they'd probably figure it out. And I think but I think that's a characteristic of the people who are willing to take those risks, and to be open to the kind of journey that you've taken, quite honestly.
No, I agree with that 1,000%. I think doing podcasts, especially like after, 50, 75, 100, and you start to go, oh, like it's kind of all the same conversation. And like it's exactly what it was is that's why I didn't just do real estate investors because I was like insert profession here that somebody excelled in, whether it's a UFC champion, an astronaut, a Super Bowl champion, a real estate investor, like a comedian, like anything. It's all the same stuff of like doing hard stuff, routine, self-doubt, discipline, surrounding yourself with other people, showing up when you don't feel like it, like all the habits of success. Like nobody, as you said, there's exceptions, but it's very rare. Like, and it's interesting because I remember like it kind of clicked for me one day where I was listening to some podcast and they were talking about how one of the guys was like, "Yeah, man, I train like boxing every morning, like in LA at this like really prestigious place that Manny Pacquiao trains at or whatever." And they were like, "Well, who else does your guy train?" He's like, "Dude, my guy's the best. He trains Brad Pitt. He trains this guy." And it was like two or three of like the biggest names you would think of. And he was like, "Well, obviously, like those dudes come in and everybody kind of like, oh, here's your water, here's your towel, and they sit there and they get their nails done." And he was like, no." He was like, he said that guy's in half hour early every day. He's done 30 minutes before he even shows up. He stays an hour later. Like he works harder than anybody in there. And I was like, oh yeah, like the guy's not the biggest
Mr.
movie star in
Beeson.
the world because he slacks off or takes shortcuts. Like that's where people don't see is like the comedians that come on. It's like, dude, the amount of bad sets you have to do that people don't laugh at you to get it to people laugh at you. The amount of auditions that Brad Pitt goes on that he didn't get before. Dude, I watched Eminem get booed off stage in New York City at the end of the 90s. Like, like literally, I remember it perfectly. And 2 years later, he was the biggest star in the world. Like, nobody, for the most part, was born on third. And so I love listening to people because everybody thinks it's something different. They're all looking for, like, I'm going to listen to this podcast to figure out, like, what's that one secret thing I didn't know? And then you realize that there is none. Like, you just
The
got.
secret thing is that everybody puts the work in. Everybody, it's actually, I've been trying to teach my kids this right now because my kids don't, my kids being 10 and 11 years old, they want the glitter without the work.
Yeah.
And like they're sort of like, I wanna be just like Ariana Grande or whatever her name is. And I was like, okay, like you're talented, sure. And I said, but you know what she did? She worked hard. Like I'll bet you $50, kid, that this woman worked and put her graft in, and she built her talents, and she worked, and she failed, and she worked more, and she failed, and then she's that a little. And my daughter loves football, and she's like, oh, Ronaldo makes it look so easy. And I'm like, yeah, if you have any idea how much work that man puts in to make it look that easy, that's the missing ingredient. Is that these guys they've got the talent, absolutely, they got talent, but they nurture and grow that talent through effort. And that's kind of universal.
Yeah, my buddy had a great quote. I don't know if he made the quote, but shout out to Alex Stewart of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy. And he always said it takes effort to become effortless. And it was like, yeah, that's what it is. Like you make it look easy. Well, it was really hard to make it look easy. You know what I mean? Like the
Well, music, you play, I play. And when I was studying music in the conservatory, the amount of hours you put in so that your body no longer thinks, and you can simply live through the music, essentially, for a want of a cheesy way of saying it. But you're no longer thinking technically, how do I do this? Or you're not worried about the fingering or anything about that. You know that your body will do it naturally. You can do it almost in your sleep. Then you get to go outside of that pure physical element and really try and get to what you're trying to say. But that takes an enormous effort to get to the point where you are so good that you can then speak in the way you want to speak with your own voice, as a musician, at least.
Yeah, it always blows me away when people think that something's different, especially a thing like real estate, where they're like, "Oh, I watched this guy on YouTube. I'm just going to do that." I'm like, dude, you think that that's all that is? If that's all there was, like everybody would be a multimillionaire. Like, and then they join Pace's thing or like something. They go, "Oh my God, I really." But like, I always give the example of like, "Oh, well, if YouTube's that great a teacher and you don't need like practice and lessons and stuff, there's a tutorial right here. Slash shows you exactly how to play Welcome to the Jungle. Here's a guitar, just play it." And then they're like, I'm like, yeah, because you can't, you know what I mean? It's not, you can't just watch it and do it like that. There's more to it than that, you know what I mean? And I think social media is giving people this misconception. Like, I remember like Ryan Pineda, like some of these guys are like, well, I'm just going to do what they do. I was like, yeah, he's got $100,000 a month staff for his Instagram. You know what I mean? Like, you think they like these, they're not just posting a video on their iPhone and becoming like internet sensations. Like, nobody's just doing those things. But I think it gives the generations a misconception of that you can be, because it's the exception, not the rule. And I think it kind of poisons things a little bit, but it's also amazing because it's giving exposure to what's possible. And that's really the biggest thing I've gotten is once you accept the fact that it's going to be a bumpy ride, but I can get there. And then you surround yourself with people every day like you, like all the people we're talking about, the Ryan Weimers, the Adam Whitneys, the Matt Andrews. Like, the coolest thing that I've seen is every single day you realize that everybody's just a person and all the people around you are doing amazing things. And at some point you can too.
Absolutely. Well, let's take this just before we close out. Let's take it back to real estate and let's take it back to some kind of fundamental bits, because one of the things I always like to do, particularly when talking to someone who has good experience, who's made mistakes, I'm sure, and been and been hit in the mouth, both in the ring, but also in the business world. I always like to kind of bring it down to some of the hard lessons you learn when you are, if you are starting up or you are trying to scale up a real estate business, the hard lessons. And for me, technology is one of the equalizers and one of the absolute essential elements. If you are truly trying to scale a real estate business. So can you give me a little insight onto when you started to get really serious with real estate and you realized, which means processes and structure, et cetera. How did you go about from a technology point of view? What was sort of the first steps you took? And what kind of mistakes did you make and things you realized only after kind of making those mistakes?
Yeah, great questions, man. So I guess a two-part answer. One of them being, as far as technology and stuff, I'm gonna date myself. I'm kind of getting old now, but I remember when I was first putting out offers and mail merge and eFax were like the new hot tech. And I remember looking at my mom and being like, "Mom, it will how does it get any better? Like, we have hit the pinnacle of technology, eFax, you know what I mean? And it's like today that would be considered like so primitive. So it's pretty amazing how in like 10, 12 years things have changed. But even just like, dude, like I was doing remote investing before like FaceTime and Zoom and like all these tools that you had were, Bing Maps, if anybody remembers that. That was the thing. In some of these markets, like buying stuff in Indiana, like they didn't even have satellite views yet. It would be like satellite views coming soon to this area. And so that was like one of the big things, like which I think having visibility, people have this emotional context of I have to be close to the property. And it's like, well, no, like you need to have somebody be close to the property, but it doesn't have to be you because technology now allows them to, like, dude, if I need somebody to go, like, kind of both things here, I'll give you an example that ties both in. Trust but not verify by far is the biggest mistake where, oh, he's a nice guy. I'll let him start work and then I'll have him sign the contract. Oh, I'll give him the money for last week, even though he didn't get it done because he needs to pay his guys. I don't want his guys to walk off. And then, like, they didn't pick up the phone for 3 days. And then I didn't want to hear bad news or I didn't want to have bad conversations. It's a great day. I'm having a good conversation with Jordan. I'm going to find that if that contractor screwed me over tomorrow because I don't want to ruin my day. And like, then you put off these hard conversations. And I always tell people have bad days, not bad deals. Because when you put off having the bad day because you don't want to have the tough conversation, you don't want to cancel your plans to take care of business, you give them 2, 3 months and now you have a bad deal you can't get out of. And so things like when I have a 72-hour rule when I'm doing stuff that if I don't get some sort of video, pictures, reports, or responses within 72 hours, I'm going to send somebody literally from Craigslist or Facebook. I'll go in a group, but I'll say, hey, I have this property in Arkansas and you guys are the local group. I will pay somebody $40. Go there and FaceTime me from the property. And like literally, somebody will message me. I'll pay them to go out there. I'll give them the lockbox code. And then I'll be like, just go on Zoom. Here's my Zoom account. And I want you to record the walkthrough. And I'm going to talk you through it. Go here, show. Okay, now this isn't done. That's not done. Oh, there's the contractor. He's drunk. He moved in a week ago. All right, well, tell him his ass is fired. And I'll, like, get out. And so, but you catch these things when they're small by getting somebody in there
Early.
Early, yeah, within that, because deals won't go off the rails in 3 days. So it's not like these things won't happen. But the difference I tell people is like, I can get somebody online to go and run over the property and shoot me a video or an inspection report from the beach or from jujitsu. Like a furnace went out, like my furnace blew out. It's like fucking 20 degrees here, and I was at jujitsu in California, and I was like, shit. Went online, hit up a couple people. Guy called me, went over there, FaceTime me, showed me what the problem was. I knew he was there. He showed me the invoice. He fixed it for, you know what I mean? So you handle these things where if this was 10, 12 years ago, I would have been in a car or on a plane going to the house. And I'm like, you can get the same stuff done. You can get the same result, but you don't have to physically go there. And so I feel like tech hasn't eliminated the problems, but it's made things so much more efficient where you can get answers and visibility, but it's still up to you to make sure that you're keeping them on a tight leash because just because somebody is there, if you're not on top of them like a babysitter, human nature is they're going to slack off, they're going to go off the rails. And if you don't catch it by having that system of checks and balances with stuff, and a cool thing is if you don't know how to set like a draw schedule or an accountability schedule or like pricing or materials or contract like tech AI now, dude, like you can plug these things and be like, look through this and tell me if it's compliant with this state. Like there's so many things now that we didn't have there. But people just rely now almost the other way of too much of like, well, AI said to this, that person's probably doing it. No, assume people are not doing things and catch them and be the boss that day. Don't be afraid to be the bad guy because that whole slow to hire, fast to fire. Those have always been my biggest mistakes is giving people too much rope and then I wound up hanging myself with it.
I think that's a great point. It's funny as you were talking, it reminded me why I added video calling to smartphone. I added video to calling to smartphone specifically because I had a bunch of buddies who were either had a bunch of properties they were managing or were doing remote investing, and they were like, "Man, it'd be really nice if I could do a video call and have that recording immediately logged against my lead in my CRM. Can you do anything about that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can do something about that." And that's genuinely why we added video calling so that you can be calling. And most of my guys who use it, they'll be calling their contractors every week. Their contractors will be sending. They'll do a video call. The contractor or whoever will be walking around the house showing them the thing, and that recording is immediately against that property in their system, and they've got that historical record of every video that's been done. And as you were speaking, it just reminded me that the other thing it reminded me of is that I had a contractor here on my property, and I just gave him way too much rope, and I hung myself. I was like, well, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. Oh, he's a nice guy. He came down that Saturday that one time to help me out. So, here he goes. And then I regretted it ever since. And your point of that, I think, is not only does technology give you that visibility, that's true, but your wider point I think is even more important, which is you need the discipline to enforce that. You need the discipline. That to me, that's what my takeaway from what you said is, don't forget the technology is great and it gets better and better, and good God, the things we can do now, like the things we're doing, the things we're all doing, but the discipline to enforce it has to come from you.
Yeah, man, 100%. I think that that's very well said.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, I mean, now let's do, what are you doing right now? Podcast, real estate, investing, like what? Let's talk a bit about the podcast. Make sure people can get at it because it's a fascinating podcast. I've listened to a whole bunch of episodes now. Because I remember back in the day seeing that it was on. So I've had it on my podcast for. You probably have one Polish subscriber, or hopefully more. So tell me, podcast and what you're doing now, kind of how people can find you, and if there's anything that they can help you with.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. So, podcast is called the A Game Podcast, Real Estate Investing for Entrepreneurs, and the Real Estate Investing for Entrepreneurs. It's a real estate foundation, but man, it's just been wild because I get celebrities, musicians, some big bands, UFC fighters, like astronauts, people of all shapes and sizes that come in, and as we were saying earlier, just tell the principles of just what it takes to be successful in anything. And So that's been like very cool for me of being able to pick up the phone and interview my heroes and have better connections with guys like you. So it's available everywhere you watch and listen. If you went to nicknicknick.com/links, links, it basically will bring you everything. So I'd say YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts would probably be the best ways to get that. All my social media is on there. I'm on Instagram. I'm on all the usual places. Yeah, man, and I don't really like have much to push. Just if you like it, that's cool. Subscribe. And my big thing is at some point, if people are looking to do deals, whether you want to maybe buy an investment property from me, sell an investment property to me, or find a way maybe partner on a deal some way somehow over the next year or two, man, I'm always around. I'm always looking to do more with some good people. So especially if you got anything in the Chicago suburbs, send that over my way, and let's find a way to make some money together.
Awesome. Well, Nick, I will make sure I put all those links in the show notes. It's absolutely it's so much fun to talk to you. Always a pleasure. I'm very grateful you and I have connected in such a way this year. I'll be seeing you in a few months, I'm sure. And by the way, I fly through Chicago a lot.
Oh,
So
dude, definitely link up.
yeah. Next time I'm flying, because I've got about a trip a month to the U.S. right now for the next 6 months. So a lot, if I'm going to anywhere on the West Coast, or if I'm going sort of Phoenix or Utah, those areas, I often fly through Chicago. So I will let you know as soon as I schedule a trip to Chicago.
Yeah, man, I'm like 45 minutes from O'Hare. I'll definitely meet you.
Yeah, I love Chicago. I love flying through Chicago. I've always loved staying downtown in Chicago. I've got my favorite bar in Chicago. I love Chicago. So I'll let you know about that. It was an absolute pleasure to see you. We're recording this. I mean, this is going to come out afterwards, but it is New Year's Eve tomorrow. So a very happy and healthy 2026 to you.
Happy New Year, man. Yeah, I'm really glad we connected, man. It's been fun getting to know you more. And, I met you in person a few months ago. Finally, we've stayed connected ever since. And I look forward to hanging out in March, man. If there's anything I could do for you, your listeners at any point, man, I'm always happy to support you. I love everything you're doing. I've always been a big fan of smartphone and everything you guys do over there. Customer service has been outstanding. Fantastic product. I appreciate you, coming into my life personally and professionally, man. You're a stud.
Thank you so much, Nick. And thanks everybody listening. Check out Nick's podcast. I'll put the links in there. It's the A Game podcast. And of course, like, comment, subscribe, do all the things you're supposed to do for both of us. Like by this point, just do it. And leave a rating. Have a very good rest of the year, which is one day for all of us. And Nick, thanks so much for stopping by.
Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to another amazing episode of That Real Estate Tech Guy. Head over to thatrealestatetechguy.com to check out all episodes and get special discounts on tons of awesome real estate technology platforms.